CISO Choice Awards Vendor Recognition with Richard Stiennon.
Hi, I'm Richard Stiennon, and I'm here speaking with Paul Trulove, who's the CEO of SecureAuth. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Richard. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I wanted to congratulate you on your CISO's Choice Award. Very well deserved. And I wanted to kick off with a quick question and just tell us what the big issues are that SecureAuth is addressing.
Yeah, the big issues in authentication and access management today really, I think, fall into two categories. Number one, we've got more things that we have to protect from a cybersecurity perspective than ever before. And users are kind of fed up with the legacy approaches that most organizations are still utilizing, whether that is, workforce access or whether it's consumer access into a wide range of products and services. I think that I know my authentication experience on a day-to-day hasn't changed a whole lot. We have a lot of multi-factor and two-factor authentication things that have popped up, but we've been doing that now for a while. And so, at the end of the day, we have more and more digital reality in our day-to-day lives. And I think, less enjoyment in a lot of ways of how we interact with that. And authentication sits, right in the middle of it. Identity more, broadly, I think sits right in the middle of, how we're going to have to approach this and solve it over the next several years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but there are hundreds of identity solutions from all the different authenticators, all the biometrics, all the tokens, all the directory services, everything. How do you differentiate and rise above the noise?
Yeah, I think, one of the ways that we're doing it is by helping organizations begin to really look at authentication through the end user's perspective. And at the end of the day, when I want to access something, I want it to be immediate and I want it to be frictionless. And that's, I think what we're going to have to solve for. And most of the solutions that have been implemented have prioritized security as the primary, really the primary user interaction mindset, which is we're going to keep everybody out and we're going to make it very hard for them to get in. And while that is very important, especially in a zero trust world, I think we've got to bring the bar up pretty quickly on how we leverage the vast amount of information that exists around the actual authentication event, so that if the risk profile of the particular session that's being requested is relatively low, we can bring the bar way down. We don't have to put everybody through the same, authentication flow just because, they're coming into an application. If I know that this is a typical scenario and it's a very low risk scenario, let the person in with very little friction. If the system is smart enough to detect that something is out of character for whatever's happening right now, then I can bring, I can drive for additional factors of authentication so that I get the level of assurance that I need in order to let the person continue. And we have to make it more continuous. I think authentication for too long has been a very point in time part of the journey. And we need to be gathering context before and after the authentication event to really, really force, that balance of risk and user experience.
Do you learn that behavior, for lack of a better word, from everybody with the same role? Or is it an individual, from the day they're first logged in and enabled, you track what they do, and then you kind of change things and add friction if they change their behavior?
It's more the latter. I think role is part of it, but really what we're trying to do is come up with a set of attributes that we know about a person and can observe, so that when we're going through that authentication transaction, we have all that data available. So I like to think about, if I walk into my home office on a Tuesday and I authenticate using my biometric on my MacBook, and that's a typical pattern for me. After that, all of the other authentication can be relatively frictionless to the web apps that I'm using, the SaaS apps that I'm using, my VPN, because I've already gone through that basic authentication. And if I bind to the device so that it's a trusted device, I can leverage that in a very universal way to streamline authentication for everything after that. Now, if I all of a sudden show up one day and I'm in a coffee shop in Argentina, it should probably ask for a higher level of assurance before it allows me to come through. Now, the reality is we have an office in Argentina, and so I'm there on a regular basis, and it can learn that behavior that about every 90 days I show up on this IP address. And, therefore it's not my normal behavior, but it's also not completely out of, the element for me and what could be expected.
Reminds me of one of my pet peeves. I used to, I'd buy an airplane ticket to whatever, London, with my credit card. And I'd land in London and try and use it, and it would block me because I was in a different country. They wanted you to physically call beforehand to tell them, hey, I'm going to London.
Right.
And I'm going, well, they've got the information that I flew to London. Why don't they just use that?
And I think this is a very similar paradigm. And that's, where the credit card companies have been able to take a lot of the data that they collect. I know now if I use my, American Airlines Advantage card to book a flight on American, I get a nice, email or text saying, we've already registered your trip. Don't bother, getting on the website, don't bother calling us, because we have the data on both sides of it.
There you go. Perfect. So for SecureAuth, I really want to know the deployment model, because you just mentioned there are a lot of things you have to authenticate to. How complicated is it to deploy? Do you have to do some exercise every single time there's a new SaaS app?
No, the nice thing about our approach is we're trying to simplify the way that this particular set of capabilities can be leveraged by an enterprise. And so from a customer perspective, they really have a couple of options. I think our preferred option would be that they do it as a software as a service. So, we host it, we run it, we maintain it, we upgrade it, typical SaaS model for the actual application itself. However, we can give people some optionality if they want to run it in a private cloud environment. And in some larger, more conservative enterprises, we're still seeing a lot of people wanting to run it completely on premises, and sometimes even do that in a fully air-gapped environment to the outside. And so we have that flexibility, and the capabilities vary just a little bit between full SaaS and full on-prem air-gapped. But in a predictable way in terms of availability to in an air-gapped environment to get out and reach the internet to drive certain use cases. But we give people quite a bit of flexibility in terms of how they want to run it. On the other side of that, we also give them flexibility on how they want to deliver the use cases. And so I think one of the things that we're seeing, especially in this economic environment we live in right now, is not everybody's ready for a big infrastructure replacement project, but they are very interested in changing the authentication experience for their workforce or for their customers. And so, ideally, we can sit on top of an existing IDP and just leverage a lot of the integrations that are already there, but change the user experience and change, to a much more continuous risk-based authentication mindset. Or, we can become the IDP and replace legacy infrastructure. Or if there's no infrastructure there, which we're seeing a lot of customers, expanding into a new arena where they're putting in a full IAM stack for the first time, we can be comprehensive if necessary. So, our goal, especially in the larger enterprise segment of the market where, we really have the Arculix product position, we want to be flexible, because not everybody wants to do it the same way that, maybe a peer of theirs does in the market, or, across verticals, you have vastly different needs sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like Active Directory won the battle and they're everywhere. And yet, there are other IDPs and directory services that are succeeding. Right. But the vast majority of organizations, from medium down to small, including my own, right, has no Active Directory, no directory services whatsoever. So if we signed up with SecureAuth, we'd have a web app like we're used to using, right? We get to sign up authorizations and monitor what people are doing.
Right.
Nice. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Paul Trulove, CEO of SecureAuth.
Stay tuned for more from CISO's Connect.